Okay. Hi, everybody. All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. Welcome. All right, for our monthly Ansible meetup session. Um, Today, just to introduce ourselves, just in case if you are not aware, who we are. So my name is Derek. I'm from the Singapore Solutions Architect team. Um, and Anthony, we want to introduce yourself.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Anthony Lin. I'm actually the automation specialist for Red Hat covering ASEAN.
Okay. So welcome, right? I hope everybody is well and healthy, right? Today's session we're going to go through a bit on I think another use case I would say, right, in terms of more cloud-driven use cases, as well as taking a look at what Ansible has gone through with Kubernetes today, or what is the potential what Ansible can do. If you have any other questions beyond what Ansible is doing, you can always ask. Okay, we're happy to answer any questions. There are no stupid questions. There's only questions, right? So you can ask away any questions. We'll try to find the answer. Even though it might not be related to Ansible, you can always try to ask, and we'll try to get that answer for you guys, right? Um, so without further ado, I will let Anthony share the slides.
Yep. Um, I'm gonna share my screen. So can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So this session is going to be quite free and easy as well. What I'm going to go through in the first half is more around how Ansible can be used in public clouds, as well as we will show a video demo, right, on how we are actually being used in the hybrid world as well, with, let's say, the application server, um, or rather the app running on OpenShift Kubernetes and the database running as a virtual machine, let's say inside AWS, right? And how Ansible can be used in those kind of scenarios. The second half, what we are going to do will really be around how we can look at the integration between the Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management and Ansible, right? We will just run a few quick demo on the area on how we can do application deployment across multiple OCP clusters or Kubernetes clusters, and then how we can actually look at some of the policy enforcement from a security perspective. The example in particular is more around, for instance, if you have a TLS certificate that's going to expire, you can kind of integrate with Ansible to send out notifications, for instance, right, to renew the cert. So that's kind of what this session will be about. Feel free to stop us, or if you have any questions along the way, feel free to just ask, right? All right. So open hybrid cloud, it's really how we look at the strategy for architecting, developing, as well as to operate a hybrid mix of applications across the environment. Of course, today what we are really looking at is more around our management and automation systems. So if you were to look at the certified content that we have from Ansible perspective, right? So we do cover the three major clouds, Amazon, Google, as well as Microsoft Azure, right? So those are the things that's already available today. If you were to go into, the Automation Hub, for instance, you can see that all this, for instance, are the stuff that we have from Amazon, right? And those are the different content that's available today on things like how you can create or destroy AMI images, the Elastic Network Interface, even CloudFormation, all the cloud native stuff that can be done using the AWS of doing things. We will actually have a corresponding modules that's available today to do it, right? If you look at it, about 42 different modules just pertaining to AWS. We have others for Azure as well as for Google Cloud as well, right? So just wanted to just point out that it's quite a fair bit of stuff that can be done as of today. This can be in the form of an integration that we can do with AWS. It can be things like creating VPCs or EC2 instances, S3 bucket, the networking piece, controlling the network policies, ACLs, and all those different stuff that can be done, for instance, right? Different modules that's available, right? We saw quite a fair bit of them earlier on just now in the screen that I was showing, right? The more common stuff, things like auto scaling, making sure that when you hit a certain percentage, we can scale up the nodes, for instance, right? Things like CloudWatch, DynamoDB, different things within the web service, Amazon Web Services stuff that we have. So this was what I briefly showed earlier, right? So we saw that these are the different things that's available today, and that we can actually use this freely, right? We do have a possible implementation, for instance, right, on how we can actually do automation, let's say in AWS using Ansible. There can be many different phases that people are using it today. For instance, in the first phase, we may be discussing with people who are interested in it, and after that, looking at how we can implement the setup on-prem across the different clouds, and how we can actually do things like patch or security group modifications, compliance hardening, or it can be things related to the server lifecycle management for on-prem, or as well as for the public cloud side of the house, like commissioning or decommissioning, or we can do things like backing up for critical applications, right? So this can be things that can be implemented in phases for users who are interested in using the AWS modules to perform automation from a cloud perspective, right? Other things that we can look at, right? If you're kind of familiar and used to doing this, then what can happen after that is it could be things like SSL certificate renewal, which we do for some of our customers as well, right? You can do things like VPC management, or even using things like CloudFormation, right, to do the end-to-end orchestration on the AWS environment, doing something that's more cloud native, right, on top of the other stuff that can come along with the management of this environment, like things could be around network automation or other stuff that we do for housekeeping, right? So really, there are quite a fair bit of stuff that can be done today, right, using Ansible AWS related modules. And most of these modules are actually provided by Amazon themselves, right? So if anything goes wrong, of course, we will be able to get in touch with Amazon and work on this thing together, right? And of course, beyond Amazon Web Services, the other most commonly seen environment, or rather public cloud service provider that's being consumed by a lot of people today, customers today, right, will be the Microsoft Azure. So very similar. We also have Ansible modules that will work for Azure, right, in many different aspects as well, right? Very related or similar to what we mentioned for the Amazon world, right? You can do the virtual machine creation, for instance, the Azure Resource Module template, right? It's how we actually provision resources, through the modules that we have for Azure, and you can do a lot of different things as well, right? So some of the possible usage for the Azure module, right? It could be, for instance, in a web app scenario, doing things like getting the application up, pulling facts and information from the target environment, right? Databases, right? We could also handle different stuff like the firewall rules, routes, and the likes, right? So different scenarios that can also be accomplished using the Azure cloud modules that's available today, right? This is another thing that some of the customers was asking for, right? Which is things related to how we can pull the information directly from AWS or pull from Azure, right? By doing dynamic inventory, we can actually retrieve the information for all the different machines or VMs that's available within the cloud environment. every time before we run a playbook. And in this way, we will be able to populate the inventory within the automation controller itself so that we can actually do the relevant automation against the correct target. We also allow things like filtering, right, based on the attributes of this particular instances that is within Azure, right? For instance, whether or not it belongs to a certain OS, it can be a Windows 2019, it can be, you know, a RHEL 8, or it could be some other OS that the system is on. It can be trying to just pull down all the nodes that is, you know, power on, right? So those are the different things that can be done so that we can actually manage and target the environment accordingly. So you can see over here, for instance, that we have a mix of different servers, right? There's Microsoft servers, there's Ubuntu servers, there's RHEL servers. And based on that, the grouping itself, we will be able to do the relevant actions like, you know, maybe installing applications on them or doing health checks or making sure that it is compliant, right, to whatever that we are looking for as well, right? So these are the things that we can do quite easily with the available modules that we have today, as well as the dynamic inventory that's available, right? In this case, the one that we are looking at is with the Azure Resource Manager, right? Other certified content, right, available under the AZ collection, right? So virtual network, subnet, DNS zone, security group, all these things, right? So it's an ever-growing list. Right? We get new modules coming in every now and then as well. So in this case, it's a hybrid case of having the environment in two different kind of platforms, right? So what we see over here is that, as what we mentioned earlier, the application is actually running on top of Kubernetes, and the database is actually running as a virtual machine, in this case, running inside the AWS cloud itself, right? So we have the OpenShift with the app and the AWS running the database. So based on what we see, right, this is still kind of common scenarios for some of the large customers that we have, because it can be due to things like performance issues that you need a dedicated instance just for running the database, and you cannot really just have them run as a container, right? Or it could be due to some other things, like they are in the midst of doing the migration, let's say moving everything towards a microservice architecture, right? Things are in this format in the interim. So this is one possible scenario whereby we have the automation platform that is able to manage, create instances, as well as set up the applications accordingly, right? Just by using the available modules that we have for both the cloud, as well as we have this thing called the KS module that will actually work for Kubernetes as well, right? Then the container registry, in our case, we are using Quay, right? And then we have Git and everything that will all come together to create this particular setup that we see over here, right? So let me just run through quickly, right? So this is a recorded demo that we did in the past. Basically, what I'm doing over here is that I'm using the Spring Boot Straggler application that is created by one of my friends, right? We are just using the Git repository that he has created in the past, right? So we will be using this to set up the image as well as the container itself that we will spin up within the OpenShift environment, right? So you can see over here that this is what you will get if everything is running properly. The Straggler app will come up, and you should be able to get all these things working, right, with the database running as a virtual machine. So you can see that these are some of the other stuff that we can put in, like the database information. All these things can actually be set up using Ansible, right? So you can see this as having a single platform that can handle both the container part of the stuff as well as the virtual machine side, right? So we're really looking at how it can be used if it is this kind of hybrid environment. Of course, if it is pure containerized, you know, microservices kind of setup, then we probably wouldn't want to be using Ansible, because obviously you have other stuff that can be done using the container native approach, especially from the OpenShift environment itself, right? So you can see here that we have set up, in my case, right, the SQL collections that we are using, right, to set up the SQL service. And we have other things with the Amazon Ansible collections as well. So we are putting all these things as part of the setup so that we will be able to manage the public cloud, as well as to be able to set up the required configurations and settings on my SQL service that I'm going to bring up. Right. Another thing over here is I'm also using the Kubernetes collections for this. So over here, the automation platform itself is running as an instance, EC2 instance in AWS. What we are going to set up after this is to set up an SQL instance inside. So if you were to look at the project itself, I have named the project that points towards my repository, right, where I store all the information. And what happens after that is that we set up the credentials as well, right? So I have the query credentials that being set up for the container registry, right? And then we also have the EC2 RHEL machine credentials that will be created, in this case, for accessing the VM that we will be creating. The OCP credentials is used to set up or connect to the OpenShift environment that we have, right? And of course, the AWS credentials is for us to perform the relevant API calls towards the AWS endpoint, so that we will be able to leverage on the modules that we have from AWS to perform and create the relevant resources accordingly. Right, so you can see over here that I have a DB1 that is being defined within the environment, and that we are going to use the Ansible module to go and create an elastic network interface that will be attached with the IP that we have kind of decided over here, right? So, I mean, there is nothing stopping you from using dynamic IP as well. DHCP, it doesn't really matter. It's just that over here, we decided to use a fixed IP, right? So different job templates that we have, right? Installing the database, setting up the EC2 instance, and then setting up the application that runs on top of OCP using the Kubernetes module, right? So we are using a custom execution environment. In this case, we mentioned in previous meetup on how to set up the custom environment so that we will be able to add all the relevant collections inside in order to perform the actions such as setting up the AWS EC2 instance, and to do things like creating resources in Kubernetes, right? So it's just pointing towards my my query itself, right? So I mean, I'm gonna kind of skip through some of these things, right? Because we kind of touched on this in the past on how we do and build the environment, right? We are using Ansible Builder for doing the building of the image. And if you don't set up properly, right, in this case, you can see that if you don't build it properly, you are going to end up with this kind of error that says that I cannot find the relevant packages that's needed in order for me to perform the task. Hence, we have to build and make sure that the environment has all the relevant packages before we can use it, in this case, to go and perform this automation itself. So let's forward this a bit. So then this is where I kept the images, right, within the query repository, query.io, right? And right, so we go back to the dashboard. Just to make sure that we start over here, right? So if with just the Ansible platform virtual machines, then we go back to the template. We will run the create EC2 instance playbook. So you can see over here that we are using a survey form that fills in all the information, the key pairs, the instance type, the AMI image for RHEL 8 that we are using, which security group that I'm actually using, the region that we have, the subnet ID, right? The EC2 instance name, right? You can do a drop down. You can select the region accordingly. You know, the subnet ID that we have, and the desired private IP address that, you know, we have decided beforehand, right? So with all these things passed in, we will be able to launch the virtual machine using the relevant AWS module, right? So what happens after this is basically we will just make sure that the virtual machine gets created. First of all, we set up the ENI, and then we attach it to the VM itself, right? I think it's a bit slow. Okay, so then it just deploys the VM. So then after which, if you just do a refresh, you will see that it is actually initializing, and the DB virtual machine gets created. After which, it's just using the roles that's available within the Galaxy. In this case, we are reusing the content to go and set up the SQL database, right? So all these things can all be orchestrated quite easily using the Ansible workflow as well. It's just that over here, we split it up so that it's easier to see and to kind of talk through what we are trying to achieve in this case, right? So the database name, password, and everything we pass in, we will call upon the role for setting up the SQL database that's available within Galaxy, right? So then it's just going to run through a series of tasks, right? And sets up the database. So we actually got it from the Gerling guy, right? So his repo is actually, I mean, or rather, whatever that he has in Galaxy is quite popular, right? So we just use that for setting up the SQL. And in this case, the OpenShift environment, right? We are also going to set up the relevant projects, namespaces, and the applications that resides here, and just make use of the Ansible as well, right? So you can see over here that this is the public IP, right? That private IP is exactly what we set it to be, right? So when we launch this thing, namespace that we want to set up, right? The MySQL IP address, right? And how we actually pass in the database password and everything in base 64 format, so that when we create the secrets itself, right, everything will be done properly, right? So we also have the route app host, right? Basically, that is the route that we use to access the application itself. So we pass in all this information, we will be able to set up the applications after that. So we create a namespace called the demo namespace, right? And then we will then generate the secrets YAML, apply the secrets, and get the applications running accordingly. So you can see that now the demo namespace is created, right? The workload itself, it just wait for a while, right? The pod is getting created, right? So it's the Spring Boot applications that is being set up. So you can see that this thing is up, and it's actually connected back into the VM database that we have created earlier on, so that everything is actually properly set up over here. So if you check on the app itself, right, it's up. And we just do a very quick validation that everything is actually working by doing a get towards the endpoint, right? So when you execute, you can actually see that everything is generated properly. All the information has been populated in the database, and we are able to hook up to it as well, right? So that's kind of what I wanted to show today, which is around the fact that Ansible is able to orchestrate, right? Be it the public cloud, or like in the Kubernetes environment, we can also create applications inside, and we can make sure that everything is actually gelled and configured properly. If we have this kind of hybrid setup, whereby one of which is on-prem or in a virtual machine state, and the other one is actually running on Kubernetes environment, right? Any questions from anyone?
Hey, Anthony, Chandra here.
Hey.
Earlier, you're showing the architecture diagram, right? Just before the program. So over there, you're showing the database. So this database still Postgres, right? No change, right?
Oh, yeah. So actually, this is the database for the application. It can be any database. So we are basically setting up an application that has the app portion that is inside the Kubernetes clusters, and then the database of this application is a VM.
Okay. All right. Yeah, a bit confused with whether Ansible platform database or this. Okay, yeah, that's clear actually.
It's basically this is one application.
Okay.
And we are using Ansible to manage different environments, right? You have one that is Kubernetes and one that is virtual machine running on the public cloud.
Okay. Yeah. So coming back the square one. So for the Ansible Automation Platform, still use the Postgres, right?
Yes, you will still be using Postgres.
Not change.
We are using Postgres 12 for the automation platform as of AAP 2.x.
Okay. So that one's still running on, I mean, when we install it, will run on anywhere, wherever it is, right? It won't be a containerized database. Is that correct?
If you want to set it up on the OpenShift environment, then it will be containerized in a way, right? So it will be looking something like this, whereby you have a Postgres database that's running as a pod. I mean, this is still the Tower 3.8, but regardless, right, it's going to be kind of similar, whereby the Postgres is, you can set it up running in this way, or if you want to connect, you can also connect it out into external databases. It doesn't really matter. In this case, what we did is we set up a PVC, right? And then after that, when we run the setup script, it actually sets up the persistent volume that will get consumed by the Ansible controller itself.
The setup script itself, which typically if you were to do it, is through the CLI. You edit the script, inventory, and all the configurations are there within the operator itself. Before you execute it, there's always an advanced section that allows you to actually edit that fields. Yeah.
Okay. So when we install through the OCP operator, we don't need to bother about anything, right? Just click the button and it will go and install for you. There is no customization.
Yeah. So if you were to, not sure if Anthony can show, but if you were to do it by default, then you will just use Postgres by default.
You can see that if you do it by Automation Hub, maybe I should use another cluster. Oh no, it's okay. Let me just see, right? So if you do it over here, what's happening is that you have a resource operator, which is what can be used to run the playbook. But in order to set up the platform, you have to install this, right? Yeah. So you can see over here that right now the latest version is 2.1. So when you hit install, it will set it up over for us. We run the stable channel, right? Stable 2.1 channel. And then the namespace that we are using is the Ansible Automation Platform namespace. You install, it will start to set up all the ports that's needed over here for us. It's going to take a while to set things up, after which you have to install the controller as well.
Yeah, I just did actually.
Define all those things.
So within the controller itself, you can customize what like, for example, if your external database, or what kind of which environments they are looking at, how many, all that. So all these advanced configurations you can do it within the operator. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So once we have this one, on the controller to log in, it will be using the users created within the OCP. Is that correct?
No. So if you don't specify the password and all those things, right, it is going to automatically generate, a secret for you, for the admin user. So then you have to decode that.
Capture that. Oh, okay. That's what I miss. Okay.
Then you will be able to get the password. Then you will go in. Right? So basically, what happens after this is you need to go to the controller and you need to create a controller. right? So what Derek is saying is that if you go to the YAML view, there are a lot of things that you can actually specify over here, right? Like the admin user in this case is admin, right? If you
the form view, you click form view, there's a advanced
configurations as well.
Here there's also from here it's easier.
The secrets itself you have to create first before it appears on the drop down. If not, it doesn't show, right? So these are the stuff that you need to set things up, and whatever that you type over here, it will get reflected on the YAML form. So let's say if we type, we change from this to AAP2, right? And you can see that this thing changes from example to AAP2 as well. So you can use the form to assist you in setting up and update accordingly.
That's the admin secret just now I saw. Okay.
Correct, but the thing is, you need to create your own admin secrets if you do not want to use the one that they create for you by default, because they will create a random secret for you if you don't specify.
Okay, got it. Yeah. All right. Yeah, thanks for that.
No worries. Any other questions?
Yeah, for the Kelvin here.
Hi, Kelvin.
The instances that are the controller instances that are created on OCP, licensing wise, is still subject to the same.
It will still be based on the managed nodes.
Okay.
So how many nodes we are managing by Ansible?
Okay, and that licensing is managed under the the customer service portal or something.
The portal, right? If you are a subscriber, then you will be able to get the same subscription manifest that you will load into the controller
using the Red Hat logins.
Right, you have to download the manifest. But if it is connected to the internet, then obviously you can just from the login screen itself, it will pass in your username and password, and you can get the subscription.
Meaning the first time you load up the controller,
when you go in,
will have that login screen.
Correct. Yeah. So there are three methods. One is rather direct login through the internet via your Red Hat ID and password. Second one is if through the Red Hat satellite, if you're using satellite today, you can log in the manifest itself via satellite. The last one is if you're fully disconnected, you're not using any satellite, no internet, you can download the manifest directly from your Red Hat portal, your customer portal, and then log in directly as a file through the instance.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah. So it will be similar to how you were to do it on premise today. No difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. If not, I know we are kind of running short of time as well. I'll just quickly go through some of the stuff that is behind after this, right? So just to it's taking a while to load. Just to let you guys know as well that we can also integrate with things like Azure DevOps within the public cloud space, which I think some of the customers, they may be using AWS, CI/CD approach, or they may be using things like Azure DevOps that I see some of our customers are doing as well. It can be integrated using Ansible Automation Platform. We can do things in CI/CD fashion. We help out in the continuous delivery and deployment portion. If you actually want to integrate us with things like Terraform, right, that is possible as well, right? So there are many different possibilities in terms of the scenarios that we can do today, right? Not just the more traditional approach of setting up VMs, etc., but we do integrate with things like the Azure pipelines, etc., right, to get things working. I'm not going to go through this demo. It's something that that we can take a look. It's in YouTube as well that I've published, right? The other thing that we promised to talk about today is actually on the advanced cluster management integration together with the Ansible Automation Platform. I'm just not too sure whether I have enough time to go through everything, right? So what is going on these days is that you know, there will always be a situations whereby when you start to use Kubernetes, you end up having a multi-cluster scenario, right? So the number of clusters is going to grow over time. So what we are looking at over here is having a single pane of glass, in this case, the advanced cluster management, to go and manage all the different clusters that we are seeing today, right? So we all know that it's kind of difficult if you do not have this single pane of glass to go and monitor multiple Kubernetes platform, and hence having these two will be something that will be really useful, right? So let's just skip this one as well. So what exactly is this ACM doing? It helps you with things like policy governance, right? Your policy as code, those kind of stuff, right? The advanced application lifecycle management as well, which we will take a quick look later on how we can actually deploy applications across different Kubernetes clusters just by using labels and tags, right? You can also see the health status of multiple Kubernetes environment. In our case, I'm using 3 OCP environments that has been set up. In this case, we can see that Grafana can be used to see what are the health status of this environment, right? So basically over here, right, central management, it can be used to set up OpenShift environment, where we can import multiple different clouds from different service providers, right? Like your Amazon, the Azure, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, right? We can do things like hibernating the OCP clusters to save on resources, etc., right? Or cluster pool. And after which there is this policy-based governance. We kind of take a look later on one of those examples that that we have around the fact on if the cert is going to expire, then what do? We can send out a notifications using Ansible to ServiceNow, for instance, right? Then this is around you can see over here that the Ansible integration, right, with the job itself, and they can also integrate with things like Argo CD, right? I don't have too much time to go deep, right? So I kind of wanted to show more on the demo itself so that we can see how it looks like in reality. So this is on the Grafana piece. And just to give a very brief high-level overview on how this whole thing looks like, right? So the way we look at it is that Ansible can be used in the areas that is outside of the Kubernetes cluster, right? So for instance, in our case, we are looking at you know, creating a ticket in ServiceNow before we start application deployment, and maybe setting up things like the F5 load balancer, right? When we have applications that is running across different geographies or different clouds, and we need a aggregation point, right? Or it can be other stuff. The whole idea really is that we have the resource operator that is being set up that will help us to run a Ansible job in a container form, right? Like what we are doing pretty much today using the controller. And then this thing is going to help us to set up things like ServiceNow ticket updates, as well as maybe setting up F5, or maybe in our case, can even be things like updating a database or setting up the database that doesn't exist within the Kubernetes environment. Right, so that is kind of the motivation that we have when we look at how Ansible can actually be useful in a scenario where the applications are actually running pretty much inside the OpenShift environment, right? So the ACM structure is that you always have a hub, right? And then you have the other clusters that's being managed via the hub. And so we can take a quick look, right? So over here, you can see that this is the advanced cluster management clusters that we have. If you take a quick look, what do we actually have over here, right? So it's a bit slow. I actually have 3 different clusters. The local clusters is where the ACM hub is actually being installed. It's running on OpenShift 4.8. I have a OCP cluster 1 and 2. One is running on 4.7, the other one running on 4.9, right? So if you look at the overview of all these things, you can see how, you know, all these things are being monitored and managed by the hub, right? So you can see that for instance, what are the things that's not in compliant, or what are the clusters that are in compliant, how many pods running, right? How many of them are in a failed state, the cluster status, tree ready, right? Any issues with the clusters, right? So all these things can be seen over here. The Grafana piece, if you click on this, it's going to show up over here, right? So basically what's going on is you can get a view of the cluster health, right? The control plane health, the optimization, or what are the stuff that is going on within the environment. So then where can the Ansible piece come in, right? In what we mentioned earlier, we saw that we can be useful in the area whereby, let's say, we are managing things outside of the application that is running on OCP or on Kubernetes. In this case, I have a ServiceNow instances, right, that belongs to me, right? And that we can see earlier on that I created the Pacman application running across 3 different clusters. And as part of it, I'm actually setting up the F5 as well as making sure that the ticket has been created within ServiceNow, right, as part of the whole flow. So then my Ansible, in this case, is stated over here, right? I'm not using the automation platform tool right now. Over here, in this case, my instance is actually running Tower 3.8, but the idea is similar, right? Doesn't really matter. So what we see over here is that you can actually create an application. Which, for instance, I call it Pacman, right? And then we can set up the Git repo, right? So after which, what can happen? We set up the branch, right, which is main branch. The path, in this case, is deploy. We then set up something called the pre-hook and the post-hook, which means that we will set and run the Ansible playbook, before we set up or after we set up the environment, depending on how we want to do it. So over here, I already have set up the Ansible credentials, which will point me to the Ansible clusters that we saw over here, right? This is where this thing is. And then we can set up the label, right? In this case, I'm setting up across all 3 environments, and hence I'm setting the vendor label as OpenShift. If you want to set it to just a very specific environment, then you can set the label accordingly. For instance, you can change it to environment equals to prod, environment equals to dev, for instance, right? And when you do a save on it, what happens after that is it starts to create all the resources that is needed in order to set up the application. So you can see that there is native integration towards the Ansible controller, right? So the thing that it does is that it does a create snow, right? So you will see over here later on that the playbook for generating the ServiceNow ticket will get created, right? As part of the whole flow itself. Like, yeah, so over here, you can see that now it started automatically. So it actually helps you to select all the target clusters as well based on the labels that we have actually set out. So what is going on in the backend over here in the Kubernetes environment on OpenShift environment, right? Really is that you can see that the pods are getting created, right? So this thing is actually running, right? It's a job that runs to set up the playbook. When you check, it really corresponds to what you see within the Ansible tower, where this thing is being created. So within the service now, you're going to see a new ticket with the change request ID of 336, right? So if you were to go back here, you do a refresh. This is the one, right? So it's all automatically integrated with ServiceNow, right? We are able to say that what are we setting this thing up on 3 different clusters that we have set the stuff on, right? So all the words and text are what we can write from Git. Once we make any changes to GitHub, it will automatically trigger a change, right? So we do it the GitOps approach. And it actually helps you to create all this stuff for you, right? Towards the very end of the stuff, if you refresh over here, you can see that all the resources that belongs to this application actually shows up over here within this environment. So really over here, you can see that it sets up on 3 different clusters, right? We are still waiting for the post job to run. And then, the route itself will get set up within the F5 load balancer, for instance, right? And all the job that is being seen over here as well has been created over here, right? So you can see this. So I'm just using hello world in this case because I didn't set up an F5 load balancer today, but the idea is the same, right? We will be able to set all these things up using the Ansible together with the ACM, setting things up in a way whereby it will be able to manage both a Kubernetes as well as non-Kubernetes environment. So everything will all come together, right? So then you can see that the game actually gets created, right? So if you want to, you can even play the game, right? So these are just the stuff that can be happening over here. So it's actually something where you can see that we can control where we want to set things up. We can do an update towards ServiceNow. We can do something to F5 load balancer to get all these 3 applications, right, which are running in different places to come behind a common load balancer that we can use, the global load balancer in this case. Any questions on this? Okay. Then the other stuff that I wanted to show is just around the governance. So the system is also able to do governance. In this case, you can see that this is the certificate that I've created and put inside the namespace. Basically, we create a rule that says that if the expiration date is less than 30 days, which is a month, right? In this case, we see that it's less than a month before this thing expires, then it's going to generate a violation, right? In this case, the violation over here is that I created the object inside the second clusters, and you can see that it says that this particular clusters is not conform with the requirements that we have. Then what can happen over here? There is already native integration with the Ansible environment, right? So if you click on this, you can actually see that this is the URL for the tower, right? The credentials that we are using, right? We are calling the GRC template, which is for remediation compliance, right? And then we set in things like the policy name, the target namespace. You can disable automation, or you can say that run once, right? If I do a save, it will actually go and trigger off a job within Ansible itself to do whatever that we want it to do. In this case, we kind of say that, we just wanted to send a notifications, right, in the form of a ServiceNow ticket request that gets generated. And this is what it does, right? So you can see that this is a job. When we click run once, it actually goes and trigger off Ansible Tower to go and create a CR. And if you were to go into incident, right, and do a refresh itself, you can see that this that's created, right, is 2154, which basically corresponds to 154 hour time. So then it says that, this is having problem in my second cluster, and it gets created as a ticket. So if you want to do remediations, or you want to do, renewals of certificates, trigger off AWS to do certain things, we could, right, technically do all these things as well. So it's just a very, very quick demo on the stuff that we wanted to show today with the ACM, the Ansible, as well as with all the public cloud, the on-prem hybrid scenarios that we have. Any questions on any of this?
The integration with ACM and controller is native, but what about ServiceNow?
ServiceNow is via Ansible. So Ansible has modules for integrating with ServiceNow.
Okay. But you
So,
will actually need to go into ServiceNow and set something up.
in
Am I
this
correct to say?
case, it's using the Snow module. So there is a ServiceNow module that allows us to do the creation of change request ticket. So the only thing that I pass in here is the admin user. I'm using an admin, right? The password, where the instance is. I'm using a developer instance. So these are things that is needed in order for me to perform an action on the ServiceNow instance. So you can see over here that I created a custom credentials for ServiceNow.
Yep.
So that you pass in things like username, instance name, and the password. So these are the only thing that's needed together with the ServiceNow module in order for us to be able to perform actions on the environment. So there is something called the Ansible Spoke in ServiceNow as well inside the marketplace. So that will allow you to integrate with workflow, right? So for instance, if ServiceNow wants to call Ansible Tower or Ansible Controller, you can use that Ansible Spoke to go and do that connection. It's ServiceNow Ansible Spoke. So this is the one.
That was what I was thinking. The other direction, not the.
In this case, we are calling ServiceNow. If you are using ServiceNow to call us, then this will be the way. And we can do a closed loop because this can call us. We will do the action and then we write back to ServiceNow.
Yep, it's using the ticket number. Right?
Correct. We will be able to do all those things as well. It's like an end-to-end integration from that perspective. There are quite a fair bit of stuff that can be done in all these environments. We just wanted to show how, if you want to have collaborations or a kind of hybrid situation or setup, you can actually combine all these things together and get it to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Anthony, for wonderful demo and presentation. A lot of stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think too much info. I feel that maybe I should split it into 2 sessions.
But anybody else has any other questions on their mind? Maybe within Ansible or anything for Red Hat as well. Okay. If there are no other questions, I thank you for your time. Happy Chinese New Year for those who are celebrating, and I think we will catch you guys next month. Yeah, we'll be hosting one very soon.
Okay. No worries.
Thank you,
So
everybody.
next month we'll be with Nutanix. Some their guys will join us. If you guys are interested, just join us.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Great day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You want to stop the recording?